All right. Hey, everybody. My name is Nathan Smith, and I am the Digital Programming Coordinator here at the Central Arkansas Library System. Thank you so much for joining me today for Microsoft Excel Part 3, Color Coding, Logic, and more. First things first, so that y'all have time to get this sorted out while we're dealing with the rest of the preliminary stuff, I do want to just throw that link into the chat. um, if you want to follow along today, of course, you're welcome to just watch and absorb. And if you want to go back and follow along another time, you totally can. This will be recorded and you'll be able to find it again later on. But if you want to follow along today during the class, then feel free to just follow this link here that I've dropped into the chat and comments. That's cals.link/excel-3-files. If you head to that address, then you should find the example files or the example file for today's class and the handout for today's class. That way, you'll have that to circle back to and catch up if and give yourself a little refresher if you want or need to do that. So if you're gonna want to follow along, take a moment, go ahead and download that example file and get it open, and for sure, and grab the handout if you want to, and then we'll be able to get rolling here in a sec. Okay, other preliminary things to mention. Of course, at the beginning of every class, I always like to make sure and say that if you have questions, I definitely encourage you, speak up, let me know, throw those questions out there. It's the point of a technology class is for you to learn something useful about technology. So if you're learning something useful, even if it's not something that's in my outline, even if it's something that is maybe a bit of a rabbit trail, compared with some of the stuff that we will be dealing with in class, that's totally fine. That a class where we touch on several of those topics that y'all have specific questions about, but maybe don't get to my whole outline, is a lot more successful, in my opinion, than a class where I am able to bulldoze through the entire curriculum, no interruptions, no detours, but you don't learn very much because you're a little confused or those sorts of things. So it's very important to me, when you have questions, please ask them. Don't worry about if you're interrupting. That's not going to bother me. If it's something that that we touch on later, I'll let you know that. And if it's something that needs to wait, or that we don't have time for, that's pretty rare, but on occasion people ask a question that could be a whole class on its own, then I'll let you know that too. But for the most part, we're going to make sure we tackle those questions, unless there's something truly unusual. And don't worry about whether it seems like a silly question. I'm not in the business of judging that. We all have different sets of skills, and it's not going to bother me one bit if you ask a question where it seems like the answer to me might be obvious, to you it's not. And so I just want to address the question, and I'm not even going to worry about whether it seems silly or easy or whatever. That's not a problem at all. So how would you ask those questions? What you want to do is, if you're joining me here in Zoom, if you're on a computer, at the bottom of your Zoom window, you should see a little speech bubble that says chat underneath it. Just click on that. You should see the chat pop up, probably over off to the side, and you can click down there and type your message in to ask me your question. If you are joining me in Zoom, but you're on a mobile device, that's no problem either. Tap the middle of the screen. You should see some little buttons pop up at the top and bottom of your screen, or maybe just one of those. And you should see a button that says More. Tap on that, and then tap Chat in the menu that pops up there. If you are joining me via one of the live streams on Facebook, what you want to do is just comment on the video the way you would comment on any other post on all of Facebook. Just drop your questions in the comments there and I'll see them and be able to respond to them. If you're joining me on YouTube, what you'll want to do is look either out to the side if you are on a computer, or down below the video if you're on a mobile device, and you should see the live chat there. You just click in there and type your question into the chat, and I'll be able to see that as well. All right, excellent. Well, let's go ahead and dive in. So open up that file that you got at the link that I dropped into chat earlier. I'll put that in one more time for anybody who's just joining us. And what that's going to do is, so once you go there and download the example file and open it up, it should look something like this. All right. It's going to have a weird long name. Don't worry about that too much. That's just the way that our service that we're using to host these files deals with files for some reason. So, it'll probably open up here to this particular tab. First thing we want to do is up at the top here, click on Enable Editing in this yellow area, so that way Excel is able to, so that way you're actually able to use the, to make changes to the file. Then we want to click on this tab right here that says Logical over on the left-hand side. That's going to take us back to, that's going to take us to the first example. I don't know why it ended up like this. I guess I made some changes and forgot to set the file back so that it would start on this sheet, but that's okay. All right, so let's quickly just do a 2-minute refresh on some terms, so that way everybody's on the same page. If you weren't able to join me during a previous session, that's no problem. You probably will need to have just a little bit of experience with Excel if that's the case, but you know, lots of people have that experience. So so if you're just joining me for the first time for this session, glad to have you here. But let's go ahead and refresh on some of those terms really quick. So first things first, I want to talk about a range of cells. So a range of cells is going to be a group of cells that form either sort of a rectangle or a line, either vertically or horizontally. When we write a range in our formulas in Excel, we write the address of the top left cell, excuse me, goodness, a colon, and then the address of the bottom right cell. Allergies getting me right now. So for example, this range here is going to be F3 to J11. And if I were to write that in a formula, it would be F3 colon J11, just like that. I'm going to hit cancel over here to get out of it. But that's how you would write that. So we're going to talk about ranges several times when working in formulas throughout the remainder of the class. So you'll have plenty of opportunities to get used to it. But I did want to mention that at the beginning, just as a reminder for you. We're also going to be talking a lot about formulas today. Formulas are the power tools of Excel. They're the way that they are a way that you can tell Excel to figure something out for you, to make some sort of calculation or figure out the answer to something without you having to manually do it. A formula always starts with an equal sign. So make sure you put an equal sign first, and then you type the rest of your formula. And again, we're going to get plenty of practice at that. Functions are the building blocks of formulas. So, and they're also a trick that Excel already knows how to do. So just like your dog knows how to sit, stay, roll over, Excel knows how to add and subtract and calculate an average and figure out the number of days between two dates and all sorts of things. So that's all functions are. The way you write a function is you put a keyword, the name of the function. For instance, last week, we used extensively the sum function, SUM, which calculates or which adds numbers together. And to use the sum function in a formula, what you would do is type the word SUM, open a set of parentheses, so Shift 9, put whatever numbers or whatever cells with numbers you want inside of the parentheses, and then you close the parentheses, Shift 0 to close them out to get that right parenthesis. That's how you use a function. You have a keyword, you have some parentheses. You do have to have a left one and a right one every time. And then inside the parentheses, you put whatever information the function needs in order to do what it's supposed to do. In some cases, you don't need anything. We talked about the today function last week, which basically just inserts today's date. And of course, it can get that information from your computer. So it doesn't need anything from you in order to make that work. And so in that case, you would write the word today, put a left parenthesis, and then put a right parenthesis immediately afterwards. The parentheses are required. And finally, and the information that your functions need in order to do their job are called arguments. You can put multiple arguments, you separate them with commas, and again, we'll get plenty of practice with that. And finally, a sheet. So again, just a reminder, down here at the bottom, we've got all these little tabs here. Each of those represents a separate spreadsheet inside of our Excel workbook. And so you can use those so you can use these little tabs, click through them to get around. And you can, of course, when you're creating your own workbooks, put multiple sheets inside with different sets of information. All right, great. So let's get into our first example here. Okay, so in this example, what we've got is we've got a little contest going between two folks right here. And we've kept track of how many points they've been scoring all year. And now they're at a grand total of 634 for Jack here and 675 for Diane. Now, looking at this, we can obviously see who's the winner, but what we want to do is be able to have Excel point that out instead. That way, particularly if we had a lot more information to sift through or things like that, then doing it ourselves might get a little tedious. So we want to have Excel declare a winner down here, and we're going to use a formula to do it. So I'm going to click in cell C15 right down here next to the word winner. And I'm going to come up here to the top. And so far, we've mostly had Excel do just calculations. For example, these two cells here have a formula in them using the sum function, right? So we're just adding cells B2 through B13, all of those numbers together, and we get 634. And then C2 to C13, adding those all together, we get 675 over here. So that's mostly what we've done so far. But depending on our situation, we might need Excel to sort of be able to account for multiple types of scenarios. Okay, in this situation, you want to calculate an average, but in this situation, you just want to subtract these two numbers or whatever. So kind of like we do as humans, we have this ability to sort of create these different rules and have things sort of follow each other, kind of follow in sequence. So we want Excel to do the same thing. We want it to use logic. So let's use a logical function. This is really, really powerful stuff. I use these logical functions all the time. So I think you're gonna get a lot out of this. Okay, so I've clicked in cell C15. I'm coming up here to the top. I'm going to click in the formula bar. Now, again, that's not totally necessary. If you wanted to, you could type your formula down here in the body of the sheet, but I definitely recommend instead using the formula bar up at the top because it's easier to correct your mistakes up there. Okay, so I've clicked in the formula bar. I'm going to hit the equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula. And then I'm going to type the word if. Then I'm going to open a set of parentheses. So I'll hold shift while pressing 9. I've got my left parenthesis. And once I open this set of parentheses, you'll notice I've got kind of I've got my little hint system down here. I showed you this last week a little bit. When you open that set of parentheses along with a function, then it's going to pop up and show you what it needs inside of the parentheses in order to make the function work. So we're being prompted for 3 arguments. 2 of them are optional, but we are going to fill in all 3. So our first argument is logical test. That's going to be our, and that's basically just going to be a statement that we make to Excel where we want Excel to figure out whether it's true or false. So the logical test is going to be, in this case, B14 is greater than C14. So B14 is greater than C14. The greater than sign, by the way, is the one that has the larger end on the left and the smaller end on the right. I know it's hard to keep those straight. It is for me too. We've got B14 is greater than C14. So we're making a statement to Excel. We're telling Excel, hey, look in cell B14. The number there is going to be greater than the number in C14. But if we look at that, it's not actually the case. And we'll talk about, and that's kind of important to bear in mind here in this situation. But we've got our logical test. We've set a statement to it, and Excel is going to figure out whether that's true or false, what we just told it. Then I'm going to put a comma there. And we have our value if true and our value if false. So our value if true is what it's asking for now. That's the second argument that we're looking for. Our value if true is going to be, I'll open a set of quotation marks and I'll put Jack's name in there. Close the quotation marks, and then I'll put a comma. And then since I've got the comma there, I'm now being prompted for my value if false. So if this turns out not to be true, then I'm going to open a set of quotation marks, put Diane's name, close the quotation marks, and add that right parenthesis, shift 0 to close it out. So, okay. This is my formula. I've got if, and then inside my parentheses, I have B14 is greater than C14. That's our logical test. Our value if true is Jack in quotation marks. Then I have a comma there separating that from another set of quotation marks, our value if false, which is Diane. Hit the check mark, and there we have it. Now we've got Diane's name in red and bold here. So Diane has been declared the winner. And if we look, it looks like it's working properly. So 634 was Jack's total, 675 is Diane's total, and the winner's been declared correctly. But there's actually a problem with this formula, and I want to show you what it is. So there are a couple of different ways to go about this, but basically, well, let me just show you. So I'm going to change Diane's total to be 634 here. Just click in the cell, type it in 634 and hitting enter. And now if you look down here, it still says Diane's the winner, even though it's a tie. If you look at the formula, you can see why this is. It says B14 is greater than C14. If that's the case, if this is true, then Jack is the winner. And that's what'll show up here. If, however, this is not true, then Diane is declared the winner. When you look at this, you can see B14 is greater than C14. That's still not true. It's just a tie. B14, the value of B14 is not greater than the value of C14. They're the same. So what we need to do is we need to correct this and this formula in order to make it work even if there's a tie. Now, really quick, I'm actually going to double check and make sure everything's working properly other than that. So if I have rather than C14 or rather than 634, if I have 633, now it correctly declares Jack the winner. So we know it's just the tie that is causing a problem here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on cell C15 here. I'm going to come up to the top and I'm going to click right between the word if and my equal sign. And I'm just going to put a bunch of spaces here. Now, this too is not strictly necessary, but I'm going to put the spaces here so y'all can more easily see what I'm doing. So I've got the spaces. And now I'm going to come up right next to the equal sign again, and I'm going to put another if right here. So I'll type the word if again, open another set of parentheses, Shift 9. And you'll notice when I do that, the parentheses associated with my existing if function have turned red because now that it sees this left parenthesis, it knows, oh, these are going to be inside a set of parentheses. So once I've added this parenthesis, it now prompts me again for a logical test, a value of true, and a value of false. So our logical test, in this case, what we want to do is we want to look for a tie and eliminate the possibility of a tie before we get to where we declare a winner. So our logical test is going to be C14. Oops, excuse me, B14 equals sign C14. So B14 equals C14. They've got the same amount in there. I'll put a comma. And our value of true. So if B14 is greater or is equal to C14, then it's a tie. So I'm going to just open up a set of quotation marks, put tie in there, close the quotation marks again, and then we're good to go. And then I'm going to put a comma after that. That's our value of true. Our value of false, it turns out, is just this if function that we already wrote that was our whole formula previously. So basically, this checks to see if there's a tie. If there's a tie, in other words, if this is true, then tie is what's filled in here. That's the word that's going to appear in cell C15 down here. And that's the result of this whole formula. However, if it turns out there's not a tie, then we go into this if function right here. If B14 is greater than C14, then Jack's the winner. Otherwise, Diane's the winner. We have to do one more thing, though, to finish up this formula. What we have to do at the very end of our formula is just hold shift, press 0, and close that black set of parentheses that goes with this if on the left-hand side. Because you always have to have, if you have a left parenthesis, you always have to have the right parenthesis. Then I'm going to hit the check mark or press enter on my keyboard or whatever. And sure enough, Jack's been declared the winner, 634 to 633. And if I copy the original formula, well, let's say I change this to 634 again. Now it's a tie. All right, that's working properly. And then if I change it to 675, or if I copy the formula over, let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to select cell B14 here, come down to the bottom where the little dot is. Remember how hopefully you'll remember how we did this last week. There's a little dot in the corner here. I'm going to move my mouse over it, hold down with my mouse button, and drag over to the right. And that's going to fill in a version of the formula that lives in this cell, So 675, the real winner is Diane. Great. So that is the if function. It's really, really handy. And it can be used in a lot of different ways. In fact, I want to show you one more way that's pretty cool. I'm going to click on the members sheet down here. And let's take a look at this information right here. Okay, so on this sheet that's labeled members, what we're doing is we've got a club of some sort and some organization, and these people are members. And what we've done is when we first put them into our spreadsheet to keep track of everybody's contact info, what we did was we put if they have a title like Mr. or Ms., we put that in column C here. Then in column D, we put their first name. In column E, we put their last name. In column F, we put their street address. Column G as the city, H is the state, I is the zip code, J is the country, and K is their phone number. And then what we did was we actually used a formula to create full versions of their name and their address. So here on line or on row 2, we have separately over here, we have Mr. Pryor Myatt, but over here we have Mr. Pryor Myatt all in one cell. And then similarly over here, we have the street address, city, state, zip. And over here, we've used a formula again to combine it all together. So that's pretty cool because that allows us to either, if we say want to sort by last names or something, we can do that up here in column E just by clicking on the little drop down arrow like we did back in part 1. Or if we wanted to copy and paste, individual pieces of information, we could do that easily over here. But if we wanted to paste it all in somewhere, we could totally do that as well. So, but there's a problem here. If you look down here, what's happening is the formula is working correctly here, but then down here, starting on row 9, we've got like a stray period in each of these cells. And we have a semicolon and a comma in each of these cells. The reason for that is the way that this formula works right here. So let's look at this. I'm going to click in cell A2. First thing you'll notice is we've got a new function here. Now, this function contains your $5 computer science word for today. I will let you know exactly what it does. You don't have to worry about it too much. But it's interesting to know, and it's a useful function. So what this is the concatenate function. Concatenate is your fancy computer science term for taking some text and putting it next to some other text, just putting two pieces of text together. So we're using the concatenate function here to put pieces of text together. So we've got Mr. and Pryor and Myatt here. And you'll notice there's no period at the end of any of these titles. So what we've done is we've used this concatenate function. I'll click here. And you'll notice inside of the concatenate function, inside the parentheses, I'm being prompted for arguments that are just like text 1, text 2, text 3, text 4, basically just pieces of text. So my first argument, text 1, was C2. That's the Mr. part. Then if I go over here a little ways, there's a comma. And then my second argument, text 2, is actually just a quotation mark, period, space, quotation mark. So what that does is insert a period and a space after the title, in this case, Mr. There's another comma here. So my third argument, text 3 down here, is D2. That's where the first name is. So we now have Mr., period, space, and then Pryor. After the next comma, we have a set of quotation marks with just a space in between. Nothing else there. So we have Mr., period, space, Pryor, space. And then finally, our last argument, our fifth argument, text 5 here, is cell E2, where we have Myatt. So we have Mr., period, space, Pryor, space, Myatt. That's what shows up here in cell A1. I'll hit cancel when I look there. Okay, so now you might be able to see what the problem is, why it's given us this stray period here, because we are still, there's nothing in cell C9, there's nothing in cell D9, there's nothing in cell E9. but we're still concatenating here. We're still adding period, space, and then another space. So that gives us a stray period here. There are spaces as well, but you can't see those because they're spaces. And similarly over here, we're using the concatenate function. We've got a semicolon between the street address and the next line of the address, basically. And then we've got a comma between the city and the state or province. So what I want to do to fix this formula, I want to fix it up here in cell A2, and then I want to copy the, and then I want to copy the rest of it, or I want to copy a version of that formula on down the rest of the way. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. Okay, let's go ahead and write a new version of the formula that will avoid giving us these stray periods here in column A. What I'm going to do, I've got cell A2 selected. I'm going to come up to the top, click between my equal sign and the word concatenate, and I'm just going to put some spaces here to visually separate the equal sign and what I'm about to type from what I already had there. Okay, then I'm going to use an if function again. So I'm going to, after the equal sign, type the word if, open a set of parentheses, shift 9, and then I'm being prompted again for, just like I saw in the last sheet, logical test, value if true, value if false. So my logical test, again, that's a statement that I'm going to make to Excel to tell it, hey, this is what's going on. See, or it's a statement that Excel will figure out whether it's true or false, basically. So what I'm going to do is I've got my, I'm actually going to use another function inside of here, and that's the OR function, O-R. When I use the OR function and open a set of parentheses, shift 9, what it's going to do is prompt me for, it says logical 1, and then in square brackets, so it shows me it's optional, logical 2, et cetera, et cetera. So what it's asking me for is logical tests, multiple logical tests that I can put together with this OR function. So my first logical test that I'm going to give it is C2 equal sign, and then quotation mark, quotation mark. 2 quotation marks right next to each other inside of a formula in Excel. What that means is a blank cell. So what I'm saying here in this logical test is C2 is a blank cell. So I've got C2 equal sign, quotation mark, quotation mark. I'll put a comma, and then we're being prompted for our next logical test. Logical 2 is going to be D2 equal sign, quotation mark, quotation mark. So cell D2 is a blank cell as well. Finally, I'll put a comma, and we'll do one more logical test, and I'll bet y'all can guess what this will be. E2 equal sign, quotation mark, quotation mark. And then I'll close my parentheses that go with the OR function. So we're giving the OR function 3 logical tests, and it's actually going to check each of those. So the way that the OR function works specifically is if any of these things is true, then this whole OR is going to come out to be true. And that's our logical test, right, for this if function. So I'll put a comma here. And now what I'm telling it is either C2 is a blank cell, or D2 is a blank cell, or E2 is a blank cell. If any of those turns out to be true, then we use our value of true in the if function. So our value of true is just going to be a blank cell. So I'm going to go quotation mark, and that's it. I'll put a comma after that, and then we're on our value if false here. And our value if false is just the concatenate function that was already there for us. Last thing, of course, we always if you have a left parenthesis, you always have to have a right one. So I'm going to come over here to the end of my formula, And after E2, I'm going to add one more right parenthesis, shift 0. And that is going to give me, and that's going to close out this if function. And now my formula is done. So I'll hit enter or click the check mark. And now this looks exactly the same, Mr. Pryor Myatt. So the formula is working correctly so far. The real test, though, is if I come to the little dot here and I double click on it, it's going to auto or flash fill a version of that formula down to all of these cells until it reaches the bottom, which is line 2 or row 201. And you'll notice no more stray periods in any of these column A cells. So that's great. So now our formula is still working correctly. And if I were to fill in, say, my name, for example, once I get all 3 cells filled in, then it's going to give me Mr. Nathan Smith written out in one cell, just like I would expect it to up here at the top. So that's working perfectly. And that's a really handy thing you can do with the if function, is basically you can use the if function to, you can wrap another formula in it so that only if the information that you need is there, will the formula actually work properly. Like when I'm looking at this, if either C10, D10, or E10 is blank, then none of this stuff is going to happen. It's just going to be a blank. It's just going to look like a blank cell here. But once those are all filled in, then it uses our value if false, which is this concatenate function. And that allows us to look like there's nothing here if we don't have the correct information. But then if we do have the information the formula needs to work, then we can then it starts to work. So it's a nice way to make your spreadsheets look clean, even if you want to pre-fill formulas on a bunch of additional lines that you haven't filled up yet. All right. So that is our, that's the if function and that we can use in our formulas. All right. Let's switch over and we're going to talk about data validation next. Before we do that, though, I'm going to give a quick moment for anybody who has questions about stuff that we covered so far. Go ahead and drop those in the chat or the comments. I'm going to step away from the camera for just a moment. I will be right back. And in the meantime, go ahead and drop those questions in for me if you have them, and we'll tackle those, and then we'll move on to the next thing. All right, great. I don't see anything so far. If you're typing a question, feel free to keep typing and we can circle back to it. I'll be happy to do that. These allergies are really getting me today, y'all. But let's move on to our next example here. Okay, so what we're going to talk about in the next few examples are ways of protecting yourself against errors in your workbook. There are a bunch of different ways to do that, but it's really, really helpful to have these tools at your disposal. So I want to show you this. The first way that no, excuse me. The first tool that I want to show you to protect ourselves from errors is what's called data validation. So if you haven't already, click on the data validation sheet down at the bottom. Excuse me, and we'll switch over and look at these examples. So the first, so what we have here is we're keeping track of sort of customer service cases. So we've got a bunch of different customers that we're working with, or we're in various stages of dealing with. We've got their account number here. We've got the type of customer they are. That column's blank, but everybody should either be a business, a consumer customer type, or a government customer type. There are categories for what kind of issue we're helping them with, and then there's a column for status. There's a column for the number of or for when the case was opened, what date, how many days it's been open, and what the priority of that particular case is. So let's go ahead and one nice thing that we can do with data validation is we can make sure that only certain, or really this is actually what it does in general. Data validation is a way of making sure that only certain types of information can show up in your cells or can be put in your cells. So let's start with this customer type column. So I'll select some cells here, or honestly, I could select the whole column if I want to, just by clicking this on C up here at the top, or clicking near it anywhere that my mouse pointer turns into this black arrow. Let's see. Let's zoom in a little bit too. Then what I'm going to do is, oh, wow. Okay. I didn't like that. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to the top, click on data, and click on data validation. Now, if I click the button that says data validation and has the little icon on it here, then that's going to take me straight where I need to go. In other situations, if your screen is arranged a little bit differently, you might have a bigger button that looks kind of more like this. See how I've got the icon up here and then the text down here. So you might have a data validation button that looks like that. If you do, click on the icon rather than the words data validation. But if you were to click on the words, you would just get this menu right here, and you can click data validation in that menu. That's going to take us to the data validation dialog box right here. Okay. So in this box right now, you'll see it says validation criteria, allow any value. So right now, basically anything we type in this cell can be there, and it's fine, totally fine. What we want to do is make that no longer the case. So I'm going to click the drop-down box where it says any value. I'm going to come down here and I'm going to click on list. Now we've got two checkboxes here, ignore blank and in cell dropdown. We'll get to those in a couple minutes, but I do want to just point them out and note that for this example, we want both of those to be checked. And then down here underneath source, we could click in this blank and type something in here. But what I'm going to do instead to make it easier on myself is I'm going to click this little button off to the side of the blank. You'll notice it's kind of an arrow with a line on it. And when I click on it, what it does is it rolls this data validation dialog box up like a window shade and kind of gets it out of the way so we can see our sheet here. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take my mouse and I'm going to come over here, and underneath where it says customer type, I'm going to select cells M2, M3, and M4. Then I'm going to let go. And you'll notice that Excel fills in the addresses of those cells in the blank here without me having to do anything else. So it says equal sign and then $M, $2, colon, $M, $4. This is what we talked about last week, that those are absolute references. But really what this means is M2 to M4, that range of cells, M2 to M4, these three. Okay. Now that I've got that filled in, I'm just going to click this button again to unroll my data validation box here. And then I'm going to click OK. When I do that, you'll notice right away, there's a little drop-down box next to the words customer type up here at the top. We're going to ignore that. And I'm going to come down here and click in cell C2. And you'll notice there's a drop-down box next to that, or drop-down arrow next to that as well. When I click on that, whoop, we get business, consumer, government. So this one is Mr. John Phoenix. I'm just going to come over here and click consumer because that's obviously just an individual. And looks like Aloha Munguia is a consumer as well. Sophie Garrison, probably a consumer. City of North Frumpton, probably a government, right? We've got a bunch of other consumer ones. In fact, I'll select consumer here and I'll go ahead and there's a little dot here. I'll hold down on the dot and drag to fill consumer in on these two as well. Exodus County purchasing. That one sounds like a business. I'm going to click on, oh, no, wait, that's government. Jafar McCaffrey, consumer. Frome's Frazzles, that sounds like a business. So we'll mark that one as business. Great. And I could keep going through here like this if I wanted to. Not strictly necessary, but I could. So what I want to do now is I want to, I've gone through here. I've selected a few options. So now you can see kind of what data validation is doing for us right away, right? So before we just had these blank cells and we would have had to type consumer, business, government, depending on which type of customer we had. Now we can just click the drop down arrow and we can select it from the list. It's a lot easier in and of itself. On top of that, let me show you something. If I were to type, say, consumer accidentally, and I press enter, we get an error message. This value doesn't match the data validation restrictions defined for this cell. If I click retry, then it's going to allow me to try to type it again. If I hit cancel, it's going to set the cell back the way it was before. And if I hit help, it's basically just going to show me the help information about data validation. So I'll click retry, and this time, oh, whoops, I put an M instead of an N, consumer. When I hit enter, that works just fine. So that's great. Let me go ahead and actually hang on just a moment. Okay, excellent. There we go. Okay, so that's one thing that data validation can do for you. It gives you the little list and it stops you from making little typos like that, so that everything matches up correctly. Because if I were sorting based on, let's say I wanted to sort based on customer type and then sort my information, and then sort based on the name, right? If I'm sorting by the customer type up here and I have consumer and I have consumer is going to go at the top, even if it's alphabetically, it wouldn't be at the beginning for, compared with the other listings there. So that's just kind of, that's how that could definitely make a difference in terms of making sure that your data is sorted correctly, just avoiding those little typos. And I could do that for the category and the status as well. I'm not going to do that because I want to keep us moving. But I could totally do that. And of course, now that you have the example file, you can play around with that on your own if you want to. There are some other types of data validation that I want to mention to you. We're not necessarily going to do examples on them, but I do want to mention them to you because they are pretty useful as well. So in addition to the list, like we did there, where you basically pick a list from somewhere else in the workbook and say you can only do things that are in these cells, you could also choose whole number. So if I choose whole number, what's going to happen is I get a drop down here for between, not between, equal to, not equal to, greater than, less than, greater than or equal to, or less than or equal to. And I can fill in either cell references here. So if I had like some numbers in one cell and a number in one cell and a number in the other cell, and those were the minimum and maximum, I could fill in those cell addresses, or I could literally put like 5 and 21 or whatever. That would totally work as well. But it would have to be a whole number. If somebody put 3.2 in there, then data validation would reject it. There's also decimal. Again, it could be, it'd be pretty similar to the whole number one. The only difference is it will accept decimal numbers, but it won't accept things like fractions. So you would need to make sure that you're, things like an irrational number or stuff like that, that you can't fully represent with a decimal. There's the list option. There's the date option. So you can, the cell will only accept a date. It won't accept just a regular number. And you can set minimums and maximums there, or you can have it match a specific, a specific number, things like that. Times, similar thing. Text length, that's the number of characters. So the text length would be the total, essentially the total number of letters, numbers, characters, and spaces in your cell. So you can set a text length and you can change that depending on what else is in your workbook, all kinds of stuff. And then custom. In custom, you actually write a formula, and then it puts the information into that formula to the information that you typed in the cell into that formula to figure out whether the information is acceptable or not. It's a little weird. We're not really going to fully get into that because it's a bit complicated, but that's something that you'll be able to do with a little bit more practice. I noticed someone's using the hand raise function. Go ahead and just type your question in the chat, and that way we can tackle it. Let's see. Here we go. So that's data validation. Oh, one last thing. To remove data validation from your sheet or from a particular cell or a particular set of cells, just select that cell or that set of cells, and come up to the top here, click on data validation, and go to, you can change the, no, thank you. Here we go. Let's see. All right. You can set the cell to, or the, excuse me. You can change this to any value, and you can check. And if you've got it, if you've only got one particular cell selected, you can check apply these changes to all other cells with the same settings, and that will work just fine. Yes, you can't. Oh, the clear validation circles. Good question. Yeah, Nancy. What that is there's basically, before you apply data validation, obviously you can type whatever you want into the cells. So if I remove it, let me remove it for a second here from this column. And then I say like, consumer. There we go. And then I'll apply the data validation again, like I did before. And click OK. There we go. Okay, so now I've got all of these things that are valid. And then there's this consumer, which is not correct. If I come up here to data validation and I click circle invalid data, then it'll circle this because technically the data validation is applied to this one. And it'll circle this right here, which is is a typo. Then if I want to remove those, I can click clear validation circles, but that's all that button does, the clear validation circles. Everything to actually remove data validation, you have to go to the data validation box and change it back to any value for those particular cells. And like I said, if you only had one of these cells selected and you go in here, select any value, and then you click apply these changes to all of their cells with the same settings, it'll apply it to all of those, not just the one. Then, yeah, let me show you these check boxes too really quick. So there's ignore blank and in cell dropdown. If I leave ignore blank checked, that's kind of the normal, that's usually the best way to go about it. Because, well, otherwise it's going to give you hassles about these cells that you haven't filled in yet. And then in cell drop down here, if that's checked, what's going to happen is, or if that's unchecked, then you're not going to get the little drop down arrow right here where you can pick from the list. You'll just have to type in something, and you'll have to type it exactly the way it appears in the list in order for data validation not to reject it. I guess you can also click clear all, and that'll remove all the data validation. Okay, cool. Oh, maybe just from that cell though. Interesting. Okay. Anyhow. All right. Let's keep rolling. So we've got the but that was a good question, Nancy. Thanks for asking that. Anytime y'all have questions, make sure you drop them in the chat. So let's look at this one here. On this duplicates sheet, I've got, oh, you're very welcome. Thank you. That's kind. On this duplicate sheet here, I've got a bunch of different fake people listed. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to, before I say copy and paste or try to print mailing labels for people or things like that, I'll probably need to go through here and sort out the or I'll need to go through and look, because there's a chance that there are some duplicate listings here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up to the top. Now I could select all of these cells, but there's no need to really. I just need to have my selection somewhere in here, basically. And then I'm going to come up to the top and I'm going to click remove duplicates. Excuse me. You'll notice it pre-selected all of these cells except for the very top ones, because there's a checkbox here that says my data has headers, and indeed it does right up here at the top. So I'm going to leave that checked. Excuse me. But of course, if I started straight into my list up at the top, at the very top here, then I would want to uncheck this box. So let's see what we've got. We've got a bunch of different options here. So you'll notice I have two buttons that say select all and unselect all. By default, all of these options are selected here. Email, title, first name, last name, street address, city, state or province, zip code, country, and phone number. So basically what we're doing is, with these checkboxes, we're trying to tell Excel which columns matter for sorting out duplicates and which columns don't. So for example, if you place an order with a company and you accidentally misspelled your name on the form or something because you were in a hurry, things like that, then you might end up listed, twice in their system somewhere. Or, in another situation, you might have somebody who is, you might have just two people who have the same name. My name's fairly common. I know there are at least 3 or 4 Nathan Smiths knocking around just Arkansas. and so so they're going to be so if we all ordered from the same company somewhere, then it might not be a good idea to just go based on the name. We might need to go a little deeper than that. So I'm actually going to leave all of these selected, and I'll click OK. And what's going to happen? It says 14 duplicate values found and removed. 36 unique values remain. Now, because I left all of those checkboxes checked, it looked at every single one of these listings to find, to find the duplicates. And if everything else matched, but the phone number was different, then it was not considered a duplicate. But see, I wonder how many. Yeah, here we go. See, if you went by last name, you could have had a problem here. Yep. Yeah, so right there's a further problem that we've got. We still have a duplicate, at least one in here. Here's Mr. Frederick Birmingham. You'll notice all of these are the same. 5698 Broadleaf Manor, Zuko, Alberta, 24R2Y0 in Canada. Everything else matches, but we have Frederick and we have Freddie, right? So a really good way to go about this is using the email addresses. Email addresses are kind of special because you can only have one person with the same, with a given email address. Now, that's not strictly true in one sense. I here at work, I have access to some shared inboxes that a lot of people can use, can send and receive messages to and from. But but there's no situation where, say, for example, take, for example, the email address that's associated with the technology classes. That email address is digital@cals.org. If someone sends an email to that email address, then I or my colleague April will be the ones who have access to that email. There can't be another person out there somewhere who has that same email address and is using a different password to log into it and is completely separate from us. Email addresses are unique. So if we go through here, we can kind of see there's Jen Yerger and Jenny Yerger and things like that. So let's use the email address to narrow this down even further. What I'm going to do is come up here again, click on remove duplicates. And this time I'm going to unselect all and I'm going to click on email and click OK. 6 duplicate values found and removed. 30 unique values remain. So now if I look here, we do have 2 Birminghams, but they're completely different people. There's Tethal and there's Frederick, and they live, in fact, in completely different countries. So, finding a good strategy for sorting out duplicates is really, really helpful. And it's a really useful tool that you can access up here. Again, this is on the data tab at the top. All right. So let's dig into one more way to protect your work from errors. And also, problems with problems that might be caused intentionally even. Okay. So here's what we want to do. First, we want to, I'm going to talk about how to protect different parts of your workbook. So one easy way to do this is you can hide columns or rows. Now, this is not, this is a pretty, it's a pretty simple kind of thing, but it definitely is worth knowing about. If nothing else, sometimes this will help you get around your workbook more easily and disregard parts of it that you don't that you don't really need to fool with right now. So on this protecting sheet down at the bottom, we actually have a column and a row that are hidden already. If you look at your column letters, you can see that this is the case. So we have D, E, F, G, I, J, K, L. So we're missing something there. In order to find column H, what I'm going to do is move my mouse over the borderline between columns G and I. Click with my right mouse button, or if you're on a laptop, you can tap with 2 fingers on the touchpad. And I'm going to click unhide. And that's going to hide, or that's going to unhide our secret column that says you found it, you found it, you found it over and over again. Yay. All right. So we found it. Then you'll notice also over here on the side, even if you've scrolled all the way to the top, you'll notice our row numbers start with 2. So 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, but no 1. I'm going to come up to the top just above column or row number 1. Again, click with my right mouse button or tap with 2 fingers on if I'm on a laptop touchpad, and I'll click unhide again. There is a secret top row. All right. So now we've revealed all of our sheets secrets here. One other thing which I forgot to change, I meant to tweak this when I was changing when I was updating this example file last time, but I forgot to do it. Up here at the top, you'll notice there is a secret, and then top row, those are all merged together. I want to go ahead and unmerge those so that it doesn't cause problems. Go ahead and click in the big there is a secret cell. Click on the home tab at the top and click merge and center, and that'll unmerge that one. And then click on the top row cell, come to the top and click merge and center again, and that'll unmerge that one. So now we're all set. Yay. Okay, cool. So let's talk about protecting our sheets inside of our workbook. The first thing that we want to do is we want to, well, say, for example, you want to include a particular sheet for somebody's reference without necessarily, without giving them the ability to change it. Because, particularly if it's very critical information, if they changed it accidentally, then they might be working off the wrong information, and that would definitely be a bad thing. Here, let me really quick take this. So in that situation where you want to protect an entire sheet in your workbook, it's actually pretty easy. All you need to do is up at the top of Excel is the review tab. Click on that. Of course, the review tab we talked about toward the beginning of part 1, just briefly touched on it. It has some things like the spell check and the thesaurus, some collaboration tools like comments, but it also has this protect area right here. What we want to do is click protect sheet. When I click on that, then it's going to prompt me for a password. Now, you don't have to fill in a password if you don't want to. If you do fill in a password, it's going to ask you for it again once you click OK, just to make sure that you've typed it in correctly. Be very careful with this. If you put a password on your sheet and then you forget what that password is and you don't have it noted somewhere, you will no longer be able to make changes to that sheet. So you want to make really sure that it's a password that you'll remember, or that it's something that, or that you are, or it's something that you've recorded, so that you, even if you forget, you'll still be okay. So we've got our password if we want it. It says protect worksheet and contents of locked cells. I honestly am not sure why there's a checkbox for that. It's kind of weird, but anyway, we'll leave that as it is. And then these are some options that we'll allow for users. So if you leave these two checked, which are the ones selected by default, select locked cells and select unlocked cells, then that will allow you to select, or that will allow other people when they come along, even if they don't know the password or even if they haven't unlocked the sheets, to select the cells, to select cells inside of that sheet. And that's useful. And then there's format cells, format columns, all of these. There are a lot of other options you can enable for your users if you want to. Most of these, though, we probably don't want to if our goal is to protect the information that's stored on this sheet. So I'm just going to leave the password blank. I'm going to leave these two checked, and I'm going to click OK. And now, if I click around here, great. I can do that just fine. But if I were to say hit delete to try and clear this, cell, the cell or chart you're trying to change is on a protected sheet. To make a change, unprotect the sheet. You might be requested to enter a password. I'll click OK. And then up here at the top, you'll notice rather than protect sheet, there's an unprotect sheet button. And I can click on that if I want to unprotect it. Now, again, if I had put in a password, it would have prompted me to type the password again, just to make sure I got it right. And then when I went to click unprotect sheet, it would have prompted me for that same password. And I would have had to be able to enter it. I would have had to enter it in. So that's protecting a sheet. Next, you have the ability to protect certain cells on a sheet. So this one's a little weird. I want to show it to you, but I just want to preface it by saying it's a little strange, and I know that it is a little strange. Let me show you this. So first of all, let's say in this situation, we want to protect these credit card numbers and the credit card information so that doesn't actually accidentally get changed, because then we can't bill our customers, right? So in order to do that, what we're going to have to do is make some tweaks to some other cells on the sheet. That's the weird part. Let me show you what I mean. If I right click on one of these cells, or again, tap with two fingers if you're on a device with a touchpad, then it's going to give me this big old menu. And what I want to do is find down at the bottom, format cells. When I click on that, it gives me my number formatting for this particular cell, but I also have alignment, font, border, fill, and protection. That's the one we need for this situation. When I click on protection, you'll notice there's a checkbox that says locked, and there's an unchecked checkbox that says hidden. Locking cells or hiding formulas has no effect until you protect the worksheet. You'll notice it says down here, and then it tells us how to get to the protect sheet button, which we already have. So by default, all cells on this, in your sheets are locked using this checkbox. It's a little strange. So what we actually need to do in order to protect just the cells with the credit card information is we need to unlock all the rest of the cells. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to come up here to the top, select column A and drag over until I get to column D. I'm going to click with the right mouse button somewhere down here, or tap with two fingers, hit format cells. And then where it says locked, I'm going to uncheck the box and make them unlocked. Click OK. Then I'm going to start with column H over here and drag over to at least column N, right click, format cells, and uncheck the locked checkbox for those cells and click OK. So now only these three cells are locked, because by default, all the cells in your workbook are locked. But all the rest of these, at least over to column N, are not locked. So now when I come up here and click protect sheet, I'll just click OK and use the default settings again. Now, if I go to make changes here, if I try to delete something, that actually worked. I'll hit undo. But if I come over here and I try to delete one of these credit card numbers, the seller chart, you're trying to change it on a protected sheet. So what it did was when I protected the sheet, Excel only protected the cells that were marked as locked. All the rest of the cells that were designated as unlocked, it didn't protect. And so if you want to only protect some cells on your sheet, that's how you need to set it up. All right. So I'm going to go ahead, come up here, or I'm going to click unprotect sheet again. And then let me show you a couple of other little things here. So in addition to hiding columns and rows like we did before, or like we saw before, in addition to that, you can also hide entire sheets on your workbook. So if I were to come down here and right click on one of these sheets, or kind of over here somewhere, well, I guess just here, it's going to give me a drop-down menu. And what I want to do is click unhide. When I do, I get this box where there's a reference sheet, which we don't need, but there's also a sheet called hidden sheet. Let's click OK. You found it. Yay, fireworks, fireworks, fireworks. So this sheet's been hidden inside our workbook the entire time. And that way, if you have information that's not necessarily relevant to the people using your workbook, but you don't mind there being a copy of it inside the workbook, or you need a copy of it in order for your formulas to work or things like that, you can just hide the sheet, and then it's out of everybody's way, but you can also get to it if you need to. If I wanted to re-hide it, all I need to do is right click on the sheet and click hide. And there it goes. Okay. You can also protect what's called the structure of your workbook. The way this works is if I come up here to the top and click protect workbook, it prompts me for a password. And then I have a checkbox for structure, and then another one for Windows that's grayed out, which I'm assuming is because I only have one Excel window open. If I'm looking at, I can open a file in multiple Excel windows if I want to, but I don't need to do it in this case. So I'm protecting the structure of the workbook. I'll click OK. I'm not going to fill in a password again. But if I did, it would prompt me to retype it one more time just to make sure I got it right. And now the workbook is protected. Making changes inside the workbook or inside of individual sheets or individual cells is just fine, even with the workbook protected. But while the protection's in place, I won't be able to make a lot of particular types of changes, mostly ones that affect an entire sheet. Hiding or unhiding them. For example, if I click here, hide and unhide are grayed out. I can't do that. I wouldn't be able to add an additional sheet, move the sheets around in order here, delete them, and I wouldn't be able to rename them. I can change the information that's inside the sheets, but the sheets themselves will stay pretty much exactly as they are. Of course, if you need to make any of those changes after all, you just come up here and click protect and click the protect workbook button again. So it'll no longer be grayed out, and that will allow you to make changes to the structure of the workbook. And of course, if you put in a password, it would prompt you for the password. Last thing, if you want to protect an entire file by encrypting it, you can do that. I'll come over here and click on the File tab. That opens up the backstage here. I'll click on Info on the left-hand side. And then I would click Protect Workbook and then Encrypt with Password. When I do that, it's going to prompt me for a password. You will have to have a password in order to encrypt the file. You type in the password, and then Word or Excel will be able to open the file just fine. But each time you open the file, you'll need to type in your password. And anybody else who opens the file, they'll need to type in their password. All right. So those are some different ways that you can protect your file or your sheets or individual cells from accidental or even malicious changes. What questions do y'all have about that before we move into our last set of examples here? All right, I don't see anything. If you're typing, keep typing. If not, then we'll go ahead and move to conditional formatting. So I'm going to click on the conditional formatting one sheet here. And this will probably look familiar. This is the same set of data from the data validation sheet over here. And what we want to do this time is we've got all our information filled in. And over here, you'll see it says close cases within 5 days. We've got our number of days that the case has been open. We have our priority here. We have the date that the case was opened in the first place. And what I want to do to help myself stay a little more organized is I want to color code this stuff so that it will, so that I can see which cases I need to focus on. Because if I'm supposed to close cases within 5 days, some of these are overdue. And I want to try and knock those out so that I'm not, so that I can catch up. In some of these cases, I've got a while yet on. So here's what I want to do. What I want to do is I want to select the cell where we have, or select the column where I have the days that the case has been open. Column H here. And then I want to, oh wait, sorry, hang on. Let's not do that example yet. We actually need to focus on this column first. So this column this column here is the priority column. So I've been assigned a priority level for each of these cases as it was given to me, and I want to color code them so that again I know which ones to focus on and which ones I can put a little more on the back burner. So, in order to color code them that way, I'm going to select column I here. I'm going to come up here to the top and click on the Home tab to go back there. And then I'm going to find this conditional formatting button and click on that. When I do, it gives me a big old drop-down box. Conditional formatting is basically a way to change how your cell looks according to the information that's inside it or to information that's related to that cell in some way. So I'm going to click on the conditional formatting button, and I'm going to come down here and move my mouse over color scales. And I'm going to select the, I'm going to select, let's see, hang on. Oh, it just went away. I'm going to select over here, this second one from the top left, the red, yellow, green color scale. When I click on that, you'll notice all of my highest priority cases, priority 10, are red. Then as it gets a little lower priority, then it moves into orange territory around 7-ish or so. And it moves closer to yellow around 5. 4, it gets to be kind of a yellow green. And then 1 is just purely green. So what this does is tells me, okay, these red and orange cases, I better get on those right away because those are high priority. But the other stuff I can maybe have on the back burner unless maybe they're overdue. So let's talk about our second thing. Again, we've got the number of days open. The case has been open listed here. And I have my expectation of when I should be closing these cases over here on the right. So in order to color code that way, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select column H again. Then I'm going to come up here and click conditional formatting once again. And I'm going to go to highlight cells rules and click greater than. So what this is going to do is it's going to format cells that have a number in them that are greater than the number that I specify. So in this case, I could just type a number in here. Just type it in manually. But what I actually want to do is, let's say that this timetable might shift from time to time. Like you might have, in some seasons, you might need to close the cases within 3 days rather than 5. And in other seasons, you might have 7 days, right? So if that's the case, I want to be able to come in here and just change this number and then have my color coding respond. So instead of just 4 or whatever, I'm going to come up here and I'm going to click on the little arrow like we did with data validation, click in cell K2, and then click the little down arrow again, unroll that, and click OK. When I do that, I don't know why this gets color coded because it's text. It shouldn't, it's not a number that's higher than 5, but it does for some reason. But all of these are color coded. All of these that are 6 or 7 are color coded in red with a pink fill, and everything else is just black. Again, I could use a scale like this so that I can see like, oh, okay, you know, these I'm getting close to the due date for, these I'm pretty far from the due date, and that sort of thing. But this example at least highlights which ones are overdue. All right. So let's do a couple more examples with conditional formatting. It's pretty useful. It's nice to be able to look at your data and see at a glance kind of what you've got. So let me show you one more thing to do on this sheet, and then we'll move to the last sheet to do something that's a little bit complex, but I think is worth at least seeing. So it'll show you kind of the some of the really cool stuff you can do with conditional formatting. So what I want to do in this example is I want to color code I want to color code each line based on what type of customer I'm working with for that case. So I've got consumer, I've got business, and I've got government. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my mouse, move over column letter A, hold down on the mouse button, and drag over till I get to column H. Select all of those. I'm not going to select column I because it'll throw off my priority color coding, but I'm going to get the rest of these. Then I'm going to go to conditional formatting, and I'm going to click on manage rules at the bottom of the menu. Once this conditional formatting rules manager box comes up, what I'm going to do is I'm going to click new rule just below the title there. And I'm going to come down here where it says use a formula to determine which cells to format. Then it has a blank that says format values where this formula is true. Remember I said earlier with data validation, if you use the custom data validation, then you can actually write a formula. It'll plug the information in, and that will determine whether that information is acceptable in that cell. This works very similarly, and I'll show you what I mean. Okay, it says format values where this formula is true. I'm going to click in the blank right here, hit my equal sign to tell Excel to expect a formula, and I'm going to type the word if. Once again, just like we did before, if, and I'm going to open a set of parentheses, Shift 9. Now, it's not going to give us the little hint system down here, so we have to be extra careful to avoid typos. But thankfully, what we're typing is not all that complicated. Okay, I'm going to go if, open parentheses, and then we've got $C1 equal sign, and then open a set of quotation marks, consumer, close the quotation marks, comma, and then in all caps, I'm going to just type true, comma, and then in all caps, I'm going to type false. And then I'll close my parentheses, shift 0. So this formula is written out in your handout, by the way. But let me just walk you through it really quick. I've got equal sign if I open my set of parentheses, $sign C1. So the C1 makes C, the column letter, absolute. In other words, Excel, we want Excel to look specifically at column C, where we have the customer type, either business, consumer, or government, and nowhere else. Then, but we're looking at row 1, which is relative. So we're kind of, so we don't have to, or so as we move down, from row to row, it'll be checking the same row that we're working on. So C1 equals consumer in quotation marks. So basically what that says is consumer is what's written in that cell. And then if that's the case, then our value if true is just true. And our value if false is just false. If it turns out to be true, in other words, that consumer is written in cell C1 or C2 or C3 or C4 or whichever row we're on, then we're going to change the look of all these cells on that particular row. So I'll click Format, and I'm just going to fill it in with, say, light blue so that's readable. And I'll click, So I'm clicking Format. I'm clicking Fill up here at the top, choosing my color to fill the cell in with, and then clicking OK. When I click OK again and click Apply, you can now see all of the rows that have a consumer type customer on them are shaded in blue. So, so that helps us figure out, so that helps us see at a glance, okay, this is a consumer customer rather than a business customer or a government customer. I can do a similar thing with the other two. I'll go new rule again, use a formula to determine which cells to format. And I'll go equal sign if, open my parentheses, $sign C1 equal sign, and then open a set of quotation marks, government, whoops. Oh man, I messed that up. It's hard to correct mistakes here. You'll have to backspace if you mistype, or else click your mouse very precisely in the place where you want to correct things. So inside of my quotation marks, government, close my quotation marks, comma, true, comma, false, and then I'll close my parentheses. I'll click Format down here and choose a fill color. So let's say I'll fill it in light green this time. Click OK. Click OK again. And now we have, and then I'll click Apply. And so now all of my government customers that are listed on my spreadsheet, their rows get filled in with green. And actually, I'm going to click Edit Rule here, and I'm going to just copy this really quick. So copy, cancel, and then I'm going to go New Rule one more time, use a formula, click here, and I'm just going to paste it in. But this time, rather than government, whoops. See, it's tricky making those corrections. I'm going to put business, go to Format, fill it in with kind of light yellow, click OK, and OK, and then click Apply. So now all of our business customers are color-coded yellow, all of our government customers color-coded green, all of our consumer customers color-coded in blue. And you'll notice that Because these are at the top, they take precedence over this rule right here that highlighted our overdue cases. So if I wanted to, I could, I can just leave it and the text, the numbers themselves will still be red here. But if I prefer to have the whole cell filled in red like it and pink like it was before, then I can click on this and I can hit this up arrow a few times to get this on top, click apply. And now the whole cell will turn pink. The text will be red unless it's not overdue, in which case it'll just be the normal color coding that the rest of the row has. There we have it. Okay, so if y'all are willing to hang on for one more example, that's perfectly, that's great. I really appreciate it. And hopefully you will learn a lot from the final example here. If not, I totally understand if you need to go. It is past our time. If you want to circle back and watch later on, you can find the recorded version of this. The easiest way to do it is, to head to our YouTube channel. And a good way to do that is to just use the address cals.link/YouTube. I'll throw that in the chat and comments here. You can use that. You can subscribe to the channel, which would be awesome because we have a ton of cool stuff there that I think you're going to enjoy, aside from just technology classes. So you can circle back and see that last example later if you need to go now. Totally fine. And if you do need to go now, thank you for joining me. And hopefully I'll see you next week for part 4, which is on pivot tables and pivot charts, which are really, really handy. And a couple of, and lookup as well, the VLOOKUP function, which is also quite handy. Okay, so let's go ahead and dive into our last example about conditional formatting. Conditional formatting can be really, really helpful in a lot of different ways. In this example, what we're going to do is we've got our same sales numbers that we used last week for our chart. This time, what we want to do is we want to highlight when somebody's sales numbers have fallen a little bit, just so that we know what's going on and we can keep track of that more easily. So here's how we're going to do that. We've got our, basically what we want to do is have Excel essentially for each cell, look at the cell next to it on the left and say, oh, okay, that's a higher number or that's a lower number, and color code accordingly. Basically, it'll turn it red if it's a lower number than the previous quarter's sales numbers for that person. So here's how we're going to do that. I'm going to select all of these cells, cell C2 to I6. Now make sure you leave out the first column with numbers in it, and make sure you leave out the column headers because we don't need those. Next, what I'm going to do, is come up to the conditional formatting button again, click on that, and click manage rules once again, like we did last time. This time it's blank because we're on a different sheet. No rules here. And we're going to go to new rule up at the top. Click there. Okay. So one last time, we're going to click use a formula to determine which cells to format. I'm going to click in the thing here, hit my equal sign, and we're going to type if one more time. Then I'm going to open my set of parentheses, and I'm going to go C1. So cell C1 right up here. This is the one that I'm pointing to, but wait, hang on. C2, I think, actually is correct. So I'm going to go C2. Did I get that correct? Okay. I'm going to trust my notes here. I'm going to go C1. There we go. C1 is greater than or excuse me, is less than B1. So the less than sign is the one that looks like an arrow pointing off to the left. C1 is less than B1. That's my logical test here in the if function. I'll put a comma after that. Our value if true is true. Our value if false is false. We'll close our parentheses here. And there we have it. So equal sign if, open our parentheses, C1 is less than B1, comma, true, comma, false, and then close our parentheses. I'm going to click format. And this time I want my format to be just filling the cell in with red. Maybe not quite so bright red. I'm going to click on more colors here, go to custom, and I'm going to lighten it up just a smidge so it's not quite so overpowering. There we go. Kind of a pinkish red. I'll click OK and click OK one more time. And then click apply. There we go. So if you look at it, it has turned out correctly. Good. I'm glad that I trusted my notes here. So what we have is our, no, it's not working. I think I was right. So I'm going to have to change this. Edit rule. Okay. We need to go C2 is less than B2. I've got to go in and correct that in my handout. So B2 is less than C2. I'll click OK. And now click apply. There we go. That is working correctly. So here's what's happening. I wrote a version of the formula that was comparing C2 and B2, these two cells right here. So C2 here is less than B2 here. That's our logical test. If that's true, then what's going to happen is it will fill in the cell with red. And you'll notice, but you'll notice this is a higher number. So it turns out our logical test here was false. And over here we have, so we just get false as the result of this whole formula. And that means Excel will not color code specifically cell C2. But as we move along into these other cells, Excel is using essentially a rewritten version of this same formula. So when we come over here, we've got suddenly we have D2 is less than C2. And if D2 is less than C2, which it is, then our result for the formula is true. And this cell gets color coded in red, which it did. So that's how this formula works. Basically, you're just checking each of these cells as you go along, looking to the left of it and saying, okay, well, let's color code this one if it's less than the other one. You could do that a bunch of different ways, but that's just one example of how you can use a formula with conditional formatting. Excuse me, goodness. All right. Well, any last questions before we wrap it up for today? Again, next week's session, that's going to be our the last session of our 4-part series. That will be Excel Part 4, pivot tables, pivot charts, and VLOOKUP. Pivot tables are really interesting. They're kind of hard for folks to wrap their minds around at first, myself included. I had trouble understanding it at first, but there are a few key things once you know them. Pivot tables become pretty easy. There are a lot of people who are pretty good with Excel, who do a lot of other cool stuff with Excel, don't know how to use a pivot table. And those people look at you like a wizard if you can tell them that you do know how to use pivot tables. So I definitely encourage you to come to Part 4. It's very cool. Pivot tables are really interesting. And I think you'll get a lot out of it. All right. I don't see any questions in the chat or in the comments. So I guess we're good to go. We'll go ahead and wrap it up for today. thank you all again so much for joining me. I love teaching the Excel class. It's always just really cool seeing all these neat things you can do with it. And Nancy, thank you for coming. You're very welcome. I'm glad to have you here. Um, y'all just have yourself a fantastic rest of the day, and I'll talk to you on Monday. Bye.